Welcome to Kashrut Explain Part 2. We're talking about the laws of meat and dairy, and now to the sources from the Mishnah on. The chapter in the Mishnah in Tractate Hulin, chapter 8, which deals with the prohibition of cooking meat with dairy, contains several contradictions. Here I will present only some excerpts. It says this: fowl can be served alongside cheese on the table, but they are not eaten together. The school of Hillel forbids serving fowl alongside cheese. This only refers to the dining table, but one can put fowl next to cheese on the serving table. 2. One can wrap meat and cheese in the same cloth as long as they don't touch each other. 2 roommates can eat on the same table. One eats meat and the other eats cheese, with no need to be concerned or to create a distinction between the two. 3. If a drop of milk fell on a piece of meat, if the flavor of the milk is noticeable, the meat is forbidden. Note that it is not the famous 1:60 ratio, but rather a taste test, apparently performed by a non-Jew. 4. Rabbi Akiva says the Torah prohibition does not include eating venison and fowl with milk. There is, of course, an additional layer to the prohibition, the one we refer to as a fence erected by the sages to prevent people from transgressing the biblical law. But if we look at the Mishnah, we see that people would still eat or speak about eating venison and fowl with milk, eating on the same table, eating in the same meal, not 6 hours or anything like that. We will soon discuss the next level of prohibition as we segue into the Talmud and later writings, but it's important to be familiar with the Mishnaic text to get a perspective of the prohibition. So now, let's go to the Talmudic discussion. And we find that in the Talmud, there's an interesting dessert mentioned. It's chicken and cheese. As we have previously seen, there is a triple dispute in the Mishnah whether fowl can be eaten with cheese, or if the two could be put side by side on the same table. The disagreement and somewhat confusion continues in the Talmud. I include here Mishnaic sages with related opinions and actions are mentioned only in the Talmud. When I say that a certain discussion only appears in the Talmud, and then I will quote Mishnaic sages, it's because they are not mentioned in the Mishnah, they are only quoted in the Talmud. So in the 2nd century, we find the following. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that meat and milk cooked together cannot be eaten, but one is allowed to derive benefit from it by selling, giving, etc. This statement, which might seem marginal, is of extreme importance, since it shows that not everyone agreed with the Midrashic interpretation that the triple repetition of the prohibition refers to cooking, eating, and deriving benefit from meat and milk. It's enough to see that there is one opinion that rejects it to see that it is not or was not the norm accepted by all. Even though this is the halachic norm accepted today, there is no clear statement in the Talmud that this opinion, which as we saw previously is one of the 8, has been accepted as the final ruling. The implications of this understanding are not immediately clear and applicable, but it sheds light on the Talmudic halachic process, in the sense that sometimes a certain opinion becomes the norm without rigorous legal discussions. In the 3rd century, in Israel, people still followed the opinion of Rabbi Yossi of the Galilee, Rabbi Yossi Galilee, mentioned in the Mishnah, that one can eat fowl with milk. In Tractate Hulin, page 116, after the Talmud states that in the place where Rabbi Yossi of Galilee was the rabbi, people would in practice eat fowl with milk, the following story is told. Levi, who was a scholar and colleague of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, happened to visit the house of one Yosef, who was a hunter. He was served a peacock head cooked in milk, and he did not say a word, although it is not clear if he ate it or not. He then came to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and told him of his experience. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi told him that he should have excommunicated that family. Levi answered that since the locale was under the jurisdiction of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, he thought that rabbi followed the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who says that the prohibition does not apply to fowl and only to mammals, since they produce milk. This happened about 100 years after the time of Rabbi Yosef Galilee, and we see that it was still practiced in some places in Israel. So not only in Rabbi Yosef's place, but in other places around Israel, and in this case in Babylonia, because that was the place of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, eating fowl with milk was commonplace. It is well known that the Mishnah was the culmination of a process meant to unify halakha, but it was easier to impose that unified law in the public arena than in the private one. So, meat and milk, fowl and milk, would still be eaten at private homes, whereas the unified halakha of the Mishnah was evident in the public arena. It is hard for us to think of a similar situation today because we live in an industrialized global society where products come from all over the world and are supervised by an almost standardized system. Another major difference is that in the Talmud, or the time of the Talmud, people ate in the privacy of their families, and the concept of restaurants was limited to meals served in travelers' inns. From that story that shows that fowl with milk was still a commonplace thing in the 3rd century, we move to the 4th century. In the 4th century, in Babylonia, a practice started spreading according to which one was not allowed to eat dairy after eating meat. This is the first indication of our practice today of waiting between meat and dairy. But as we shall see, this reference in the Talmud is to a personal practice of several scholars only, and it was only signed into law by Maimonides in the 12th century. This is the discussion in the Talmud, Masechet Hulin. Agra, who was the father of law of Rabbi Abba, possibly in the 5th century, taught that fowl and cheese can be eaten together as dessert. I'm saying it again. Fowl and cheese can be eaten together as dessert. This is in the 5th century. He explained that this means that there is no need to wash hands or eat something else between the two. But it is not clear which one comes first. So Agra, by the time Agra is speaking, we don't know if the practice of eating fowl with cheese still exists, but they at least can be eaten together in the same meal. And there's no need to wash hands between the two. However, it is not clear which one comes first, even though it seems to suggest that fowl is first and then cheese. So cheese can be eaten immediately after chicken. Rabbi Yitzhak ben Mesharshia happened to visit the house of Ashay. This is going on in the Talmud, the following story. Rav Ashay lived in the mid-4th century to the 5th century. Rabbi Yitzhak was served cheese and later meat, and he did not wash his hands between the two. He explained that washing hands after eating cheese is needed only if there are visible leftovers on the hands. Then Rav Asay asked Rabbi Yohanan, this is in the 3rd century, how long should one wait after meat before eating cheese? And the rabbi answered, there is no need to wait. This is not the end of the Talmudic text, but before we continue the presentation and analysis of this very important paragraph, let me first say a word about the chronology of a Talmud page. The subtitle before our previous discussion of the paragraph in Tractate Hulin indicated that it belongs to the 4th century. But when I was speaking, I mentioned 3rd and 5th century. So was the sugya indeed from the 4th century, the 3rd or 5th? So this is a typical phenomenon in the Talmud. It has to do with the question of the final editing of the Talmud, or better yet, whether such editing even took place. This is still debated by scholars, some of whom claim that the Talmud was carefully and meticulously edited, but the textual and historical evidence points in the other direction. In the relatively dark period between the last known Talmudic sages and the first Geonim, there was a group of scholars known as Sevoraim who shaped much of what we know as the Talmud. They merged discussions from different periods and places with varying results. In some places, the work of the Sevoraim is seamless, and the reader feels that he is dealing with one continuous text, unaware of the diverse origin of the particular pieces, while in other places, the discussion seems to digress or repeat itself. The Sevoraim worked anonymously, a fact which complicates the attempts of reconstructing the original text and separating the layers chronologically. In the Talmudic discussion that will follow, I will try to illustrate how this hidden editing works and how it affected the halachic mindset. Let's now return to the Talmudic discussion. We're left with Rabbi Asay asking Rabbi Yohanan how long should one wait after meat before eating cheese, and he answered, there is no need to wait. Here, the Sevoraim, whose names are not mentioned, interrupt the flow of the story with the statement, This cannot be, since Rav Hizda, who died in 309, said that one is allowed to eat meat after cheese, but not cheese after meat. The Savoraim therefore conclude that there must have been a mistake in the transmission of the story, and they rewrite it to say, he asked, how long should one wait after cheese before eating meat? And he was answered that there is no need to wait. You realize what happened here. We had a story where a rabbi asked another rabbi, how long should I wait after meat before eating cheese? The rabbi said, no need to wait. Other rabbis who lived later heard the story and said, impossible. That's not what he asked. He asked, how long should one wait after cheese before eating meat? Who would ever even think of that? But still they changed the story to be that. This is a classic example of the hidden work of the Savoraim. The story, which took place about 150 to 200 years before their time, did not make sense to them because in their time it was already customary among some scholars to avoid eating cheese immediately after eating meat. So they changed the story to fit their reality, but made it illogical from the other end by suggesting that Rav Asay had to ask whether one should wait between milk and meat. To claim that he asked this question when the widespread custom was to only wash hands between the two and not wait, borders in portraying him as ignorant. Furthermore, the Savoraim argue that the Rabbi Yochanan, who lived in Israel, should have adhered to the ruling of Hizda, who lived in a later period in Babylonia, and that also does not make sense. We will continue this Talmudic discussion in the next class, and that will be all for today.